Top 10 Super Bowl teams of all time. Please let me know what I got right and what I left out or got wrong. The 10th best Super Bowl team of all time is the 1969 Kansas City Chiefs. The 69 Chiefs would finish the regular season 11-3, scoring 25.6 points per game, but only allowing 12.6. This team is famous for maybe having the greatest defense of all time. The 69 Chiefs defense would field 6 future Hall of Fame players and rank number 1 in the following categories: rushing yards allowed, passing yards allowed, obviously total yards, total points allowed, and interceptions. They are the only Super Bowl era team to be number 1 in all of these categories. But it was in the playoffs when this defense shined the brightest. First, they went to New York and beat last year's Super Bowl winner, the New York Jets. Then they traveled across the country next week to play the Oakland Raiders. The Raiders swept the Chiefs in the regular season and made my list of top 10 teams of all time to never make the Super Bowl. But it was in the Super Bowl where this team shined the brightest. In the final game of NFL versus AFL, the Chiefs held the NFL's highest scoring offense to only 7 points. I can make a strong case that the 69 Chiefs should be ranked higher. Not only is the defense possibly the best in NFL history, they had a Hall of Fame quarterback, and Otis Taylor will join Len Dawson in Canton someday. It was Hank Stram who first started motion and shifting that every single NFL offense uses today. With his innovative genius combined with a Hall of Fame quarterback, plus this great defense, maybe the 69 Chiefs should be ranked higher than 10. For number 9, we are staying in the AFC West. The 9th best Super Bowl team of all time is the 1976 Oakland Raiders. The 1976 Oakland Raiders finished the regular season 13-1. They averaged 25 points per game on offense and allowed 16.9 points per game. This team would lead the NFL with 33 touchdown passes and had an awesome group of skill position players. On the outside, Cliff Branch would have 1,111 yards receiving, just one short of the NFL lead. His 12 receiving touchdowns, however, would lead the NFL, and Branch was named as a first-team All-Pro. Joining him on the first-team All-Pro list is tight end Dave Casper, who had finished third in the NFL with 10 receiving touchdowns. Future Hall of Famer Fred Biletnikoff's best days were behind him, but he did have enough to be named Super Bowl MVP. Stabler would end up going to the Pro Bowl and was named Player of the Year by the Sporting News and won the Burt Bell Award for MVP. Mark Van Egan would get the first of his 3 consecutive 1,000-yard rushing seasons in '76, but it was the offensive line that made the running game so dangerous. Shell and Upshaw on the left side of the offensive line might be the best left side of the offensive line in NFL history. Punter Ray Guy would not only finish as first-team All-Pro, he is the only pure punter in NFL history to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Coach John Madden still has the NFL's all-time best winning percentage as a head coach. But when you think of the Raiders, you think of vicious hits and maybe dirty play. The Raiders' only loss in '76 was to the Patriots, which they would avenge in the playoffs. This would be the 3rd consecutive year the Raiders and Steelers would play in the AFC Conference Championship game. The Steel Curtain was awesome in '76, and the Raiders would win the Super Bowl easily against the Vikings, winning 32-14. The Vikings did have the best record in the NFC that year. Now, statistically speaking, this defense was not great. but it did boast 2 future Hall of Fame defensive players. Sacks were not an official statistic till 1980, but per Pro Football Reference, they were credited with 46. Overall, this team would boast 6 Hall of Famers on offense, 2 on defense. The only punter to be in the Hall of Fame, plus Madden and Davis, makes 11 Hall of Famers total. I did put the Raiders over the Chiefs because Al Davis designed this team to beat the Chiefs. Unfortunately, after 1971, the Chiefs would fall apart and not be relevant again until the late 80s. This team might rank higher, but while the defense, physical or you may say dirty, I don't believe was great. You could score against the Raiders, and they were ranked 18th in yards allowed in 76. When researching this list, I saw more than one list calling the 76 Raiders the greatest team of all time, but I still got them at number 9. Next on my list is maybe the most underrated Super Bowl winner of all time. The 8th team on my list is the 1984 San Francisco 49ers. They went 15-1 during the regular season, averaging 29.7 points per game and only allowing 14.2. The offense was second best scoring-wise in yardage, and the defense was the best in the NFL with scoring defense. The Niners had an awesome defense and an excellent running game. They would dominate 3 great teams in the playoffs. They would beat the Bears and the Giants, teams that would win the next 2 Super Bowls, and the 84 Dolphins, who had a revolutionary offense. That team is still talked about today. This Super Bowl would be the only Super Bowl during a 16-game season where the combined losses would be this low. The Niners were 15-1 and the Dolphins were 14-2, so it's 3 combined losses. It's the combination of beating 3 great teams and how dominant the defense was that really stands out. In 3 playoff games, this team would allow 26 points total. The 84 Dolphins led the NFL with 32.1 points per game and scored 76 points, both blowout playoff wins. The offense was exceptionally balanced, 3rd in rushing yards, 4th in passing. They would be 2nd in the NFL in passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns. Wendell Tyler would have the best season of his career, rushing for 1,262 yards. He would average 5.1 yards a carry, and his fullback Roger Craig would lead the team in receptions, and Ty Tyler with 7 rushing touchdowns. But it was the defense that was special, accumulating 51 sacks and sending all 4 secondary starters to the Pro Bowl. I made it this far without even bringing up Joe Montana, the Super Bowl MVP and one of, if not the greatest quarterback of all time, dominated the Super Bowl. One thing stats will never tell you is how some players play better in big-time games. None played better than Montana in the Super Bowl. The more I talk about this team, the more I believe is underrated and too low on my list. The big reason it's not ranked higher is this team only had 2 Hall of Fame players. You can argue Roger Craig should be in the Hall of Fame, but as this video is being made, he is not. The other 2 teams I mentioned have 7 and 8 Hall of Fame players respectively, but this team only has 2. This should not take away from this team's dominance, and so while underrated and still one of the greatest teams of all time, I still have it ranked as 8th. Next on my list, just fast forward a few years. The number 7 greatest Super Bowl team of all time is the 1989 San Francisco 49ers. This team finished the season with a 14-2 record and averaged 27.6 points per game, and on defense allowed an average of 15.8 points per game allowed. In 1988, Bill Walsh would retire and George Seifert, the team's defensive coordinator, would take over as head coach. Seifert would promote quarterback coach Mike Holmgren to offensive coordinator, and Joe Montana would have the best season of his career, winning NFL MVP. Jerry Rice would lead the league in receiving yards and touchdowns. He would have 1,483 yards and 17 receiving touchdowns. John Taylor and Roger Craig would go to the Pro Bowl, and kicker Mike Colfer and Ronnie Lott would win first-team All-Pro honors. Statistically, the 84 team scored more and allowed fewer points, and no one will debate that Walsh isn't the better coach. The big reasons I have for this team being rated higher on my list are the wide receivers and Ronnie Lott moving over to safety. Ronnie Lott was a Pro Bowl corner but a Hall of Fame safety. Charles Haley tied for the team lead with 10.5 sacks and would end up in Canton as well. Not only was this team more talented, this team was on a mission after Bill Walsh retired. This team wanted to prove that Walsh wasn't the sole reason for winning Super Bowls. You have peak Joe Montana, Ronnie Lott, and Jerry Rice, and that is why I got 89 over 84. Another reason is the playoff dominance. No team in NFL history dominated in the playoffs like the 1989 49ers. They won all 3 playoff games by a combined score of 126-26. This includes the biggest margin of victory in the Super Bowl ever, beating Denver 55-10. While Denver was one of the worst teams to ever play in the Super Bowl, during the regular season they did allow an NFL best 14.1 points per game. Both the 84 and 89 Niners are top 10 teams of all time, but you tell me which one you think was better. Next is a team famous for an off-field issue. The 6th best Super Bowl team of all time is the 2016 New England Patriots. The Patriots finished the regular season 14-2, scored an average of 27.6 points per game, and on defense allowed an NFL best 15.6. Thanks to the Deflategate, Tom Brady would sit out the first 4 games of the season. However, the 12 games he did play might be the best 12-game stretch of his career. He would throw for 28 touchdowns and only 2 interceptions. What is unusual about this team is that it was a heavy run team, ranking 3rd in rushing attempts but 23rd in passing attempts. LeGarrette Blount would have the best season of his career and lead the NFL with rushing touchdowns with 18. This team would steamroll through the AFC playoffs but found themselves down 28-3 in the 3rd quarter of the Super Bowl, with the biggest comeback in Super Bowl history and Brady having all-time great numbers. His Super Bowl records consisted of 43 completions out of 62 attempts for 466 yards. My problem was where to put this team on my list. Other teams had more weapons and better numbers, but no team had a Super Bowl performance like Brady or an anger like this team had. When I first started this list, I thought this was the best Super Bowl winner out of the Brady-Belichick era, and the Brady-Belichick quarterback head coach combo is the best in NFL history. Another factor is the coaching staff is top-notch. Both coordinators and 3 assistants would become future NFL head coaches. This team could be higher or lower on my list, but I felt like 6 is a perfect spot. Again, what is your opinion? Next up is an iconic team never to be forgotten. The 5th greatest Super Bowl team of all time is the 1985 Chicago Bears. The Chicago Bears would finish the regular season 15-1 and average 28.5 points per game on offense. The Bears defense would only allow 12.4. The 85 Bears team is iconic, and the defense might be the best of all time. Offensively, this team was impressive, leading the NFL in rushing attempts, yards, and touchdowns, spearheaded by one of the greatest running backs of all time, Walter Payton. Sweetness would also lead the team in receptions and total over 2,000 yards from scrimmage. While the offense revolved around Payton, they did have a deep threat with literal world-class speed. Willie Gault was part of the record-setting 4x100 meter team in 1983. While having a regular season for the ages, the playoffs were a completely different story. They shut out both NFC opponents and in the Super Bowl limit New England to 10 points, while forcing 6 turnovers and 7 sacks. There is no question of the Bears' dominance. I really have to defend why I have them ranked so low. I have 3 really big reasons. First is Jim McMahon. While he would go to the Pro Bowl, his only Pro Bowl season of his career, he would pass for 2,392 yards, 15 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. This list is the best of the best, and those numbers are pretty pedestrian. Mike Ditka, while a great Hall of Fame player, was a good, not great head coach. And the third reason is the Patriots would finish third in the AFC East. They would upset the top 2 teams in the AFC playoffs. First, the Raiders, who had Marcus Allen, who would finish as NFL MVP that year. Then they would beat Miami in the AFC Conference title game. Miami is the only team that would beat the Bears in the regular season. Going into the Super Bowl, most people thought the Bears would crush the Patriots, and they did. Still, the 5th best Super Bowl team of all time is no small accomplishment. Next up is another team on a mission. The 4th best Super Bowl team of all time is the 1994 San Francisco 49ers. The 94 49ers would finish the regular season 13-3 and would lead the NFL in scoring offense, averaging 31.6 points per game. They would give up an average of 18.5. If you know your NFL history, the 49ers would lose to Dallas the previous 2 years in the NFC Conference Championship game. Dallas would go on and blow out Buffalo in both those Super Bowls. Most people believe that Dallas, San Francisco in the NFC Conference Championship game was the real Super Bowl. In the offseason, San Francisco would sign 3 future Hall of Fame players, Charles Mann and Pro Bowl middle linebacker from Dallas, Ken Norton. Charles Mann, when he retired, would finish the top 10 in the NFL in sacks and has been nominated for the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Steve Young would win MVP in '94, and Jerry Rice would lead the league in receiving yards and finish second in receptions. Ricky Watters would go for 1,596 total yards from scrimmage and 11 touchdowns. While not in the Hall of Fame, I will forever argue he should be in Canton. The free agent signings completely changed this team. Adding Deion Sanders would move Merton Hanks to free safety, where he would lead the team with 7 interceptions and make the Pro Bowl. The additions on defense will allow previous starters to excel. Both Hanks and defensive tackle Dana Stubblefield would go to their first Pro Bowls. This defense would finish second in rushing yards allowed and lead the league with 23 interceptions. I will argue that this was Deion Sanders' best season. Not only did he win Defensive Player of the Year, he received votes for NFL MVP, an award Steve Young would almost win unanimously. I can talk about the defense all day, but the offense was one for the ages. In the playoffs, they would average 43.7 points per game, including scoring 49 in the Super Bowl. Steve Young would set a Super Bowl record with 6 touchdown passes and win Super Bowl MVP. I have this team ranked higher than most people, but you will never find an offense this explosive with the Defensive Player of the Year, 3 future Hall of Famers, and 4 Pro Bowlers on defense. In my opinion, this team was a one-year wonder, and they would lose a lot of players after the season. This is why this team doesn't get the credit that they deserve, but on my list they do. Next is a team no one will call underrated. The 3rd greatest Super Bowl team of all time is the 1978 Pittsburgh Steelers. The 78 Steelers would finish the season 14-2 and average 22.3 points a game on offense. Defensively, this team would allow an NFL best only 12.2 points a game. In 1978, the NFL would switch to a 16-game season and change the NFL rules to open up offense. One rule is unofficially called the Mel Blount rule, which no longer allows defensive backs to hold receivers past 5 yards. This defense adjusted and allowed the fewest points in football, collecting the second highest amount of turnovers, and in 2 playoff games to advance to the Super Bowl, they held their 2 opponents to 15 points total. Normally, I don't talk about a Super Bowl opponent, but Super Bowl 13 is the exception. It's maybe the greatest Super Bowl of all time. Dallas won the Super Bowl the year before and came back better the next year. They had the NFL's highest scoring offense and defensively only gave up 13 points a game. That's better than the 15.1 they gave up the previous year when they won the Super Bowl. On the field, Dallas would have 7 players that would end up in Canton, not to mention a Hall of Fame coach, owner, and Vice President Gil Brandt. A big part of the 78 Steelers being ranked so high is winning maybe the greatest Super Bowl of all time, but you combine that with probably the greatest defense of all time, combined with Bradshaw winning MVP, a Pro Bowl running back in Franco Harris, who's also in the Hall of Fame, Hall of Fame center in Mike Webster, who's maybe the greatest center who ever played, 2 Hall of Fame wide receivers, with maybe the greatest defense ever assembled. All of these plus an NFL rule called the Mel Blount rule that forever would change the game easily makes this a top 5 team of all time. I can even argue at number 3 that this team is ranked too low. I go old school here for number 3, but back further for number 2. The second best Super Bowl team of all time is the 1966 Green Bay Packers. The 66 Packers would finish 12-2 in the regular season, scoring an average of 23.9 points per game, only allowing 11.6. Out of all the teams on this list, no team allowed fewer points. Bart Starr would win NFL MVP, and this defense would be phenomenal. They would allow only 7 passing touchdowns in NFL best, while intercepting 28 passes. 6 of these would be returned for touchdowns. If you know your NFL history, you know that this would be the final seasons for both Taylor and Hornig. Bart Starr, however, might have had the best season of his career. Starr's passing touchdowns and yards are not anything special, but his 3 interceptions are. Considering your defense averages 2 picks a game and returns 6 for touchdowns, it makes this statistic stand out even more. In the NFL championship game, they beat Dallas, the only other team winning double digits that year. And in the first Super Bowl ever, Kansas City was the only AFL team with double-digit wins, finishing the year 11-2-1. Not only did the Packers have the best record, they beat the best 2 teams record-wise in the playoffs. The combination of an amazing defense, Starr's probably best season, and Green Bay's dominance in the 60s has them at number 2. I will admit, I did think about flip-flopping them with Pittsburgh, but I firmly believe that these 2 teams played, the 66 Packers would prevail. Before I reveal my greatest Super Bowl team of all time, I have some honorable mentions. When I first started my list, I planned on including the 93 Cowboys. Out of the Dallas dynasty of the 90s, I consider the 93 team the best, and they were on my list when it started. However, the 93 Cowboys, the 96 Packers, and the 91 Redskins would all miss the cut. If I made this list a top 15, all 3 of these teams would make it, but they barely miss out on the top 10. Chiefs Kingdom. I thought about including the 2019 Kansas City Chiefs. When everything is said and done, who knows where Mahomes will rank as the best quarterback of all time. Andy Reid and Travis Kelce are already cemented in the Hall of Fame, but I think Chris Jones, Tyrann Mathieu, and Tyreek Hill will also be in Canton someday. I might revisit this list later, but for now, I got the 69 Chiefs as the better team. The greatest show on turf and the 2000 Ravens were also considered, but both teams, in my opinion, are not balanced enough for top 10 consideration. I am a huge fan of the 1986 Giants. Lawrence Taylor winning NFL MVP stands out, but not enough to make my list. Now, my number one Super Bowl team of all time. The greatest Super Bowl team of all time is the 1972 Miami Dolphins. The Dolphins would finish the regular season 14-0, leading the NFL in both scoring offense and defense. The 72 Dolphins offense would average 27.5 points per game, and the defense would only allow 12.2. This is the only team on my list with the highest scoring offense and highest scoring defense the same year. This team would also have the number one offense and defense in terms of yardage. Offensively, this team would rush for 2,960 yards, fourth best in the Super Bowl era. Both Zonka and Morris would rush for 1,000 yards each. Future Hall of Famer Paul Warfield would average just under 21 yards a catch. On a run-heavy team, they still had big play potential. If you know your NFL history, starting quarterback Bob Greasy would go down, but Earl Morrall would come in and pilot the team to 9 straight victories. Convincing Earl Morrall to come down from Baltimore was one of the best moves head coach Don Shula would ever make. Don Shula, of course, would end his NFL career with the most wins of all time, a record that still stands currently. The fact that this is the only undefeated team should be enough to say that they are the greatest team ever. Personally speaking, having the number one scoring offense and the number one scoring defense should cement the deal. I am impressed that the Steelers beat the Raiders in the Immaculate Reception game and that Miami could go into Pittsburgh and beat the same Steelers team in their stadium the following week. It wouldn't be till 1975 that the playoff games were seeded by record, so Pittsburgh this year would host the AFC Championship game, not the undefeated Dolphins. In the Super Bowl victory against the team with the best record in the NFC, the score should have matched the record. Up 14-0 late in the fourth quarter, a missed field goal would result in the Redskins' only touchdown. This would show that the Dolphins, while being the best team, the best Super Bowl team of all time, were in fact not perfect. This is my list, but please let me know what you would change and what you would do different. Drop a comment below and let me know what order you would put the teams in, or did I leave a team off who should be on this list? If you enjoyed this video and you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Join the growing community of NFL fans of all 32 fan bases. Also, I go live every Friday night, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. On the live stream, all questions are answered and anything goes. Join the live stream, and I look forward to seeing you again, hopefully very soon.